Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here with an update to one of my easiest builds of all time. This is going to be our Stamina Templar 1-bar DPS setup, the Slayer build. What I love about this setup is it does not require any trials gear, not even a full monster set, but it still does insane damage with only a few skills. And if you don't even like bar swapping, that's totally fine. I'm going to show you an easier version with just one skill bar, or of course, I'll show you how to use 2 skill bars to increase the damage even more. We'll talk about all the options, including sets, skills, passives, champion points, and a whole lot more coming up next. All right, everybody, we are back on the Stamina Templar with an update to our easy DPS build. This is the Slayer update for the Blackwood chapter. Very strong DPS setup on the Stamina Templar and super easy to play. So let's go ahead and jump into the buff stats here. Checking out the group stats. This will be off the dummy. About 14k max magicka, 21k max health, 33k max stamina, 2000 stamina recovery, 7400 weapon damage. That goes up quite a bit actually if you're running the 2-bar setup. And then 63% weapon critical is looking pretty good. In terms of your attribute points here, you will want all your points into stamina, obviously being a stamina focused DPS setup. In terms of the food that you want, the lava foot soup is very good just for practicing. You also get tons of stamina recovery and a good chunk of stamina. Now you can replace this if you have lots of extra sustain for your group. You could use something like blue food if you need more health. That's totally fine if you can manage the sustain. And then in terms of the Mundus stone on this setup, running the Thief Mundus for that extra crit chance. We have some passive buffs that we'll talk about in a minute as well. Let's talk about the race next. I am an Orc currently on this build. Orc is pretty good still. You get the max stamina, you get the max health, you get the weapon damage. That's all really good. You can do just as well, if not maybe a little bit better damage-wise with Khajiit and Dark Elf in terms of the stats. But the difference, honestly, is very small. So if you still have an Orc for your Stamina Templar, that's totally fine. It's going to work pretty well still. And then in terms of passives, what do you need to make this work? Well, on the 1-bar setup and the 2-bar setup, you'll definitely want weapon power potions. And that's because we want that major brutality buff up 100% of the time. That's going to be very, very important. So make sure you get those potions. And I think that covers the basics. So let's go ahead and talk about the gear setup next. And our primary damage set is still going to stay the same. That's going to be the Deadly Strike set. And if you're not familiar with this, great set for the Stamina Templar. It gives you weapon damage, weapon critical, weapon damage again, and increases the damage of your physical bleed, poison, and disease damage over time, and channeled abilities by a whopping 20%. And channeled abilities does, of course, count for our main spammable DPS skill biting jab. So you're getting maybe like 30-40% of your DPS from that one skill. And so this is just buffing that damage output through the roof. The other nice thing is this is not a trial set. You actually don't need any trials gear to be super effective on the Stamina Templar. You can actually buy this yourself on Guild Traders, or you can buy it with alliance points from the Cyrodiil merchants, because it is technically a Cyrodiil PvP set. So however you can get this, what I would recommend is going to be double daggers. One of those I've transmuted to Nirnhoned, and then the other sharpened, with a couple of damage enchants here. So we got the poison damage main hand, shock on the offhand. So that's going to cover 2 pieces of our 5-piece, and then we're going to use the deadly jewelry here. So necklace and 2 rings, weapon damage enchants on everything, and then bloodthirsty is going to be your ideal trait as far as dealing as much damage as possible. So that's pretty similar to how it was last patch. Now I have changed out the second set, which used to be Zogvins. You can still run Zogvins pretty effectively, but what I've seen as far as damage goes, Kinra's Wrath pumps out a good deal more damage this patch. So Kinra gives you weapon damage, weapon critical, weapon damage again, so very similar to Deadly Strike. But you also get a series of stacks when you have this equipped, and when you get 5 stacks, which you can get pretty quickly, you get the Major Berserk buff. So that's an additional 10% damage done increase on all of your abilities. You also get some nice group utility, giving your group mates within 12 meters the minor Berserk buff. So that increases their damage done by 5%. So overall, this is just a really strong DPS skill. It's a nice group utility skill. This also comes from dungeons, by the way. You can get this from the Black Drake Villa, which is part of the Flames of Ambition DLC, and basically just run this on your body. So what I have is the boots, hands, waist, chest, and helmet here. And those are medium pieces and max stamina on everything. So that's going to be our second 5-piece set. You might have noticed that I skipped over the legs. That's because for the leg piece, if you want to truly maximize your damage this patch, check out this new mythic item, Harpooner's Wading Kilt. The nice thing about this for medium armor builds, for stamina builds specifically, is it does come in medium, and it comes with Divine's trait already, max stamina. What this does is it gives you stacks of Hunter's Focus, which increases your critical chance and your critical damage done. So you get 10 stacks at maximum, which is nice. Plus, they do have a fairly long duration, so you can keep them up pretty well. And in terms of just overall efficiency, for only sacrificing, one piece, one set piece for this, it's pretty much the best you can do, as far as efficiency, getting tons of damage, crit chance, and crit damage out of this specific mythic item. So I definitely recommend you pick it up if you have a DPS build, specifically a stamina build. It's even better. Definitely check that one out. It is definitely worth sacrificing a monster set. And speaking of the monster set, we'll just have one piece of a monster set left over. I've chosen Slimecraw for the arm piece here, medium again, the Divines and max stamina enchant. You can see this gives us a good chunk of crit chance, which is going to be nice on this build as well. You can do other sets here. Also, you could do something like Krog for the extra penetration. If your group isn't fully optimized, that might be a little bit more useful. So you could actually have both of those on hand, Slimecraw and Krog, and then switch them out based on what your needs are. Now, I'll be talking about the 1-bar setup first, but if you do want to extend the damage a little bit more, definitely pick up a Maelstrom Bow for the back bar. Not only will this buff your damage quite a bit, Volley deals bonus damage when you have the Maelstrom Bow, but you do get the weapon damage enchant here, so this gives us a ton of extra weapon damage overall, especially if you have the infused trait. So that's what you're going to want, infused with a weapon damage enchant. So that's going to cover the basic setup. We've got Deadly Strike, weapons, and jewelry. We've got Kinra's on the body, 5 pieces there, and combining that with the Harpooner's Wading Kilt and the monster shoulder piece. All right, let's jump into the skills next, and I want to talk about the 1-bar setup, the easy build first, super easy. We're starting off with Barbed Trap. This comes from the Fighters Guild skill line, which is right here. That's your last ability. Now, you do want this on most stamina DPS builds. I mean, the dot damage is actually really good, almost 20k unbuffed right now, but we also get Minor Force, which is really strong. 10% bonus critical damage is what we want. We want to keep this up as much as possible. Now, if you are running Zogvins, you could choose not to run this and make the build even easier, but honestly, the extra dot damage is quite nice, so it is pretty good to run, I think, just for the damage itself. And speaking of damage, we have an AoE effect here. Ritual of Retribution comes from the Templar class line, actually restoring light. Right here, our second to last ability, and I love this skill. It has a huge range. It does massive damage, AoE damage to all enemies in the area. It ramps up 5% per tick, and there's also a nice synergy as part of this. Now, the other reason why I really like this is because it costs Magicka instead of stamina. So the good thing about that in terms of your overall sustain is it gives your stamina pool a break. Every rotation, you'll cast this, save yourself some stamina, and actually use your Magicka pool for something useful. So this is a big part of the build. Definitely recommend you check that one out. And of course, our main damage skill, our spammable DPS, is going to be Biting Jabs from the Adric Spear skill line. This just is really good damage as a DPS build, especially if you spec into high crit chance. Each one of those spears has a chance of being a critical strike. Plus you get bonus passive damage from Burning Light. There's just so much good stuff that this skill gives you. We'll talk about it more in the passives as well. And speaking about passives, all you really need on this 1-bar setup is just a couple more passives. Camouflage Hunter is nice. This comes from the Fighters Guild skill line as well, right here. This does give you a nice passive buff, Major Savagery. This does give you a nice passive buff in the Minor Berserk, giving you 5% additional damage done. Sometimes your healer will apply this, but not always. So it is nice to have it just passively. And then we are running another ability here, Ring of Preservation. This gives a nice minor protection buff as well as minor endurance. So bonus damage reduction and stamina recovery is pretty nice when you need it. Then in terms of the ultimate ability here, another Fighters Guild skill, Flawless Dawnbreaker. This is pretty strong on the 1-bar setup. Great upfront damage over time, plus it increases our weapon damage by a bonus 300 for 20 seconds, which is actually a pretty long buff. So that is the basic setup. Let me show you a quick rotation so you can see what that would look like. As far as buffs, you don't really have to worry about those. As long as you have your potion active, you're good to go. And then we're going to apply our ground dots. So our ritual and our barbed trap, and then pop an ultimate, and then just go into spamming jab. So let me show you what that would look like. Something like that. And you're going to keep an eye on your cooldowns for your ritual and your biting trap, and just reapply those as necessary. So ritual's going down. I'm going to reapply that. Barbed trap's almost down. Reapply that. And then we're back to jabs. That's literally it. That's the entire rotation. Just maintaining your jabs and your 2 dots. And that's it. Pop an ultimate when it's ready. And that's all you need to do. Also maintain your potion, obviously. That's the basic setup. Now we can talk about the 2-bar skill setup as well, which is honestly not much more complicated. We're only adding 1 additional damaging skill, and we're switching up the ultimate a little bit. So in terms of what we will move, as far as the skills go, I'm going to move Ritual Retribution to the back bar just to make it a little bit easier in the rotation. That means you can actually apply another Fighters Guild skill here if you want. Silver Leash, for example. This is good because it gives you more passive damage from those Fighters Guild passes. We'll look at those in a minute. So the front bar really doesn't change a whole lot other than moving Ritual to the back bar. Now for our main back bar dot, we're going to add in a new one, Endless Hail. The reason why we want this, we have the Maelstrom Bow, obviously, so we're getting the bonus damage from Maelstrom Bow, plus our infused weapon damage enchant. We already talked about that. I like Endless Hail as the morph. I think it lines up a little bit better. It gives you more time, just so you're not rushed too much in your rotation. Camouflage Hunter here, we talked about that already. And then just some passives, just a couple buffs you could add here. For example, Restoring Focus from the Restoring Light skill line. That's your last ability here. This gives you some good healing, armor, stamina, sustain. So it's actually a pretty good buff to run. I do recommend that. And then for your last normal ability, I'm actually going to recommend anything from the Adric Spear skill line. So for example, Biting Javelin. This is simply for the passives. In the Adric Spear skill line, you always want at least one of these abilities on your bar for the bonus critical damage. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And I did mention the back bar ultimate. We're going to switch things up a little bit. This time around, I'm running Ballista. Fully buffed on this build, you're well over 100k damage on this setup. It's really strong. Now, it does cost a little bit more than Flawless Dawnbreaker, so you won't be able to cast it quite as many times. Also, if a fight ends early, you might not be able to get it off at all. So in that case, I would recommend still using your front bar ultimate, Flawless Dawnbreaker. But for longer, like boss fights where you'll have more time, Ballista seems to do a little bit more damage overall. So that's what I've been using. And that is going to be the setup for 2 skill bars. Let me go ahead and show you how that would work. So as before, buff with your potion. And then we're going to start on the back bar actually this time with our Ritual and then Volley. Bar swap, apply the trap, and then go into Biting Jab. So it's really just 1 extra skill in the rotation that you need to worry about. So you can see my back bar dots are about to wear off. Recast those. Front bar. You can do a few more jabs until trap is getting low and then reapply trap. So that's kind of how it works. The trap is more dynamic. Other dots are more static in rotation. All right, so that is the 1 bar and the 2 bar setup, just so you can see the difference. I would recommend starting with the 1 bar build. It's really easy, just 3 skills as far as your overall damage. Once you get comfortable with those, if you're feeling good about that, go ahead and mix in the back bar. The extra damage off the bow will give you an extra 5 to 10k DPS, which is actually quite a lot just for throwing in that back bar rotation. Now, if you have any questions at all about the rotation as well, make sure you check out the written guide. I'll have a link to that in the pinned comment and the description. I'll have a lot more details there. That being said, we can talk a little bit about the passives on this build, which are actually extremely important as far as how I've set up the skills and why. This will basically explain that. So first of all, Piercing Spear is when I talked about Templar as a class gets bonus critical damage. That's one of the reasons why it's so good as a DPS class. But to get this buff, you need 1 Adric Spear ability slotted at least on your bar. So on the front bar, we've got Biting Jabs. On the back bar, you need something else. That's why I just threw in Javelin there. You could honestly do anything from this skill line. You could do Spear Shards if you want to do a little bit of group utility. Sun Shield if you want a little bit more defense. You have some definite options there. As long as you're using one skill on each bar, you're good to go for that passive. Spear Wall is another nice one. You get minor protection for 6 seconds. That's pretty useful off your biting jabs. Burning Light, we talked about the extra damage you can get from this. That's really strong. Then Balanced Warrior, we get even more weapon damage and resistance. So make sure you prioritize all of this. These passives are very good on the Stamina Templar. Now, as far as Dawn's Wrath, we aren't actually using any of these. I've dropped Power of the Light from this rotation. Though you could run it, on your front bar if you wanted to. You'll get some decent things here. For example, you can get more ultimate from the Prism passive. But basically, as far as this easy rotation, it just made sense to use jabs a little bit more than Power of the Light. So you're not getting too much from that skill line. Restoring Light is more like your healing and defensive focus skills, so you won't get quite as much from here either as a DPS skill. The one thing I would recommend is Master Ritualist. This is going to be great for rezzing allies when they go down, so that's a good one. As far as weapon passives, yes, you want all of your two-handed. Yes, you'll want all your dual-wield passives as well as the bow passives. Those are definitely important. All of our medium armor passives as well, except for potentially improved sneak. You get things like more weapon critical, stamina recovery, and stamina cost reduction, more weapon damage for wearing 7 pieces of medium. So all of these are pretty important. Now, in terms of guild passives, this is huge, you guys. Fighter's Guild is big for the Stamina Templar, and you can see why. On the 2-bar setup, I'm actually running every single Fighter's Guild ability, and there's some good reasons for that. Number one, check out the Slayer passive. This increases your weapon damage by 3% for each Fighter's Guild ability slotted. So an extra bonus 15% weapon damage. That's more than the full medium armor weapon damage passive. This is quite good. So definitely pick up that one first. Also, Banish the Wicked can be nice. When you're killing a lot of enemies, you'll get more ultimate back faster. Those are the main 2 I would recommend there. Undaunted. You can put some points there if you've got that maxed out. And then, of course, your racial skills, you want to max those out. And then Alchemy Medicinal Use is great for making those potions last longer. All right, let's talk about champion points next, starting with the green tree. And by the way, I will have different setups for this build over in the written guide, 300, 600, 900, and 1200 champion points. So no matter where you're at, there should be something there that you can get started with. Now, the green tree is all quality of life stuff. This kind of is your own preference. For me, I like the extra speed. I like the extra gold from Gilded Fingers. And then I will typically work up to like Steadfast Enchantment. This is actually really good just to keep your weapons charged a little bit longer. And then for your slotted stars, Treasure Hunter, you might as well get better quality loot out of those chests. And then Rationer and Liquid Efficiency. Those would be my top slotted stars for green. Now in terms of blue, we're going to start over here in Precision. Make sure you unlock this first. Get a little bit of bonus crit chance. Then come over into Extended Might and unlock Piercing. This gives you some bonus offensive penetration. You can come back to this stuff later. You get some more status effect chance and more weapon damage. But you want to move into your slotted stars at the point. So Biting Aura is really good combined with Master Arms. It's going to increase almost all of our damage done. 10% for each of those stars. And then once you get those, I would come back here to the main area and get Fighting Finesse. This is another 10% critical damage and critical healing. And then a big one right here, Backstabber, 15% critical damage done. Now that is when you are either behind or to the side, so flanking an enemy. You'll need to make sure you're able to position correctly. If there's some fight where you cannot get behind a boss, then this is going to be useless. So in that case, you can slot one of these other ones, either Thaumaturge or Deadly Aim in place of Backstabber. But those are basically your 4 damage slotted stars. And then you can pick up some defensive ones and some more stats. So I usually get Tireless Discipline for the stamina and then jump into Staving Death. Put in Quick Recovery and then right away Preparation. This is 10% damage reduction. Really good for taking less damage overall. If you have even more points, then pick up Elemental Aegis and Hardy. So that's blue. And then let's jump into red next. Now, it's kind of up to you where you want to start. If you're doing dungeons a lot, You may want to start here, Sprinter, Hasty, Hero's Vigor, and then get Bloody Renewal as your first slotted star. The reason why is you get tons of stamina back for killing enemies. 1500 stamina per kill with just this one slotted star. It's really good for sustain. Now beyond that, these other stars are nice as well. This is just kind of overall stats and survivability. So more health, more armor, and then more recoveries. So these are all pretty good for your slotted red stars. And then if you have more points than that, you can pick up some of these passives. Tumbling, for example, is good. And then definitely Defiance, reduce the cost of break free. And you can even put some over here for block cost reduction and increased block mitigation. Last but not least, we can talk about the outfit style. If you're curious about this, that's going to be under appearance. This is a costume, actually, from the Hrothgar chapter, going way back to the Regalia of the Orsimer King. So completing the main story quest in Orsinium will get you this cool kind of orc-style armor. All right, everybody, and with that said, that's going to wrap up our easy DPS Stamina Templar build, now updated for the Blackwood chapter. I've thrown in a full parse here at the end, so you can check that out if you're interested. And of course, if you have any questions at all, make sure to check out the written guide. I'll have all the gear sets listed there, as well as how to get them and different alternate options if you don't have them. I'll have skills and rotations for both the 1-bar and the 2-bar setup, and of course, those champion point loadouts for 300, 600, 900, and even 1200 CP. So there's tons of information there to help you out even more. Of course, if you enjoyed the video or you found it at all informative, don't forget to crush that like button. It definitely helps out the channel, and I really appreciate it. If you'd like to see more builds like this, you can even hit that subscribe button with your notifications turned on so you don't miss anything. And we even have a membership program here on YouTube with some pretty great perks like early access to videos and even more members-only content. So if that sounds interesting to you, just click on that join button for more information. As always, thank you all again so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.
Yeah.